Treasurer, thanks for taking a few minutes to talk with me virtually here about the pension fund's condition.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate you taking the time.
So let's start off. There's some new stats are out about the first quarter performance of the pension fund. And your office obviously happy to see Rhode Island ranked pretty high compared with other pension funds in the nation. What exactly did the analysis of the pension funds find about Rhode Island?
Yes, so the data shows that in the first quarter of this year, Rhode Island performed better than 95% of the public pension plans across the country. This is obviously very welcome news. These are challenging times. The financial markets have experienced a lot of disruption, but the data shows that Rhode Island has so far weathered the storm more than most other public pension plans. And, that's important certainly for the public servants, the police, the firefighters, the teachers, the social workers who are in the pension fund, but it's also good news for all taxpayers because if the pension fund were to underperform, it would be taxpayers who would be required to make up the difference. So it's good news all around.
So last time I interviewed you and asked you about the condition of the pension fund, you mentioned you were pleased at the time about the performance of I think it's called a crisis protection set of assets that had been added as kind of a test to see if that would be helpful in a crisis. Just can you explain briefly again what that is and when it came about and how it's done so far?
Yeah, we had been preparing for something like this to happen for a long time. We didn't know that there would be a virus, but we did know that there would be another recession one day, and we wanted to make sure that Rhode Island was prepared for it. So in 2016, when we launched the new investment strategy for the pension fund, we had a lot of conversations about how, in prior recessions, Rhode Island and lots of other states had taken a real hit to their pension systems, and we didn't want that to happen again. So back in 2016, we started moving almost $800 million of the pension fund to a new crisis protection investment strategy made up of investments that typically go up in value when everything else is going down. And the crisis protection allocation worked in the first quarter of this year. In the first quarter of the year, the stock market was down 20% due to the spread of the coronavirus. Rhode Island's crisis protection allocation was up 15%. And that is why we outperformed more than 95% of public pension funds in the country, and we saved hundreds of millions of dollars in the process.
Not to get too into the weeds, but I am kind of curious, so people can conceptualize it. What kind of investments are in that would have gone up when we all watched our 401ks collapse during the first quarter? What's in it?
So the largest part of it is long duration United States Treasury bonds. So very safe bonds that, when investors are nervous about the stock market, they tend to load up on safe investments like US Treasury bonds. So if you're holding US Treasury bonds, the value of those investments will go up when people are fleeing the stock market. So that's one example. We have some other things in there as well, but again, these are investments that historically in past recessions have gone up in value when others have gone down, and that pattern has held again this time.
The pension fund last time I looked was well over $8 billion, and that might have been right before the crisis really hit. But do you have a sense of where the value of the pension fund is now as we're talking?
Yes, as of now, we're in mid-May. We are around $8.2 billion still in the pension fund. So again, we haven't experienced nearly as much of a decline as other states. And frankly, we haven't experienced the same kind of decline that we did during the last recession in 2007 and 2008 when the pension fund dipped all the way down to $5 billion. So again, we don't know what the future will hold, but the early data shows that we're holding up much better than other states and much better than we did in the past.
What was the peak in the recent recovery? Where did the pension fund peak at in its value?
Around 8.7.
So it's 8.7 down to 8.2. But last time, I want to say it went from 8.2 into the sixes, right?
Yeah, something like that, exactly. It was a much bigger decline in the financial crisis.
So I get the question, I'm sure you do more than I do as the treasurer, but I get the question a lot from people saying, oh, the pension fund has gone down, what's going to mean. Will there be changes to pensions again? Will there be sudden strain on the state budget? My understanding from covering pensions in the past has always been there's a lag from when the investments have an issue to when there's actual issues or there's money needs to be put into the pension fund. Can you just give, for a retiree watching or somebody who wants to know the basics on when even the small dip, there has been a dip, when that will have to be dealt with?
So first of all, I think it's highly unlikely that we're going to need to change benefits or reform the system as a result of what we've experienced. Again, so far, because of the action that we took in implementing crisis protection, the hit to the pension fund has not been nearly as bad as it was in prior recessions. We are down a bit, as every pension fund in the country and just about every 401k is also down. But that hit wouldn't impact the state budget for 2 years. There's a 2-year lag, which gives the state time to adjust and to plan. And so, again, we don't know what the future will hold. We're obviously living in very uncertain times, but Rhode Islanders can at least take comfort in the fact that we're holding up better than most others and holding up better than we have in prior recessions when it comes to the health of the pension fund.
One last question for you, not on the pension fund, but covering the House Finance Committee hearing last week on the budget. At least one rep wondered whether the state should consider more limited bonding on the ballot this year. And of course, they'll end up coming to ask your office what you think is appropriate and allowable. Have you reconsidered whether the number of bonds and the amount of borrowing the governor had proposed earlier this year in different circumstances is going to be wise for the state with the change in economic conditions?
Yeah. We are working on updating our bond forecasting now, and I hope to have new numbers to share in the next couple of weeks. But what I would say at a high level is that the state is, like the rest of the country, in a very severe recession. A lot of people are hurting. And this is a time when we should continue to invest in projects that will put people to work and help our economy recover to the extent that we're able to afford it. So my hope is that we will still be able to have some bonding on the ballot for voters to consider, especially projects that will help catalyze an economic recovery in Rhode Island. But as far as how much we can do, we're still working on updating our model, and we should have some results in a couple of weeks.
All right, Treasurer, thanks for taking some time to talk with me.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you for having me.